Consumers are changing the way they think about brands from a number of different angles. At one side, they're just being completely overwhelmed with messages from everywhere. It's hard to know what really matters, what doesn't. They've become a bit more skeptical. They want to get a better understanding of what are these brands, what do they really mean, what do they stand for? Because on the other side in their lives, there's so much opportunity to learn more than they ever could about brands.
On my Facebook and my Twitter, I get feeds from Mashable, I get feeds from Gizmodo, Lifehacker, stuff like that. So I'm always brought up to date on what's happening in tech. And I also get feeds from different designers in the fashion industry. So if I do have a question about a particular product, I'll definitely post something and get some feedback.
If it's like a specific item, I'll go to that brand's webpage and kind of see if people have posted anything up there on the brand webpage about it, and hope that the brand has responded in some way or another. How have they gone through to correct the problem in the situation and stuff like that. So I think it's a huge part for companies to be able to take advantage of that.
So it's not just a two-way discussion, because there's not only the consumer and the brand, there's the consumer and others talking about the brand, whether they're people you know or other parties, and there could be cross conversations that a consumer could just be stepping back and looking at. So there's many different parties now talking about a brand. And I think that's one of the things that scares marketers.
I'm obsessed with Pinterest. All my girlfriends pin. And when one person finds something they love, they can take a clip of it or take ultimately the link to that item, put it right on the website, and it comes up on these beautiful boards and you can categorize, and it's just, I'm a Pinterest junkie. It's the easiest way to shop.
So I was looking for a formal dress last year, and I was on a department store website, and I really loved the dress until I read the reviews. And the reviews, none of them were good. It fit weird, all that stuff. And then one person put a link to a very similar dress on a less expensive website. It wasn't a designer dress, but I ended up ordering that, and it fit me 100 times better than the other one would have, apparently. And I know a lot of people liked that post because they had followed that post and they agreed with what the person was saying.
You can't control it. The users are controlling it, and you have to harness it, you have to encourage it, and you have to do well by your customers for it to not be detrimental.
There's also now this 24-hour, 7-day-a-week, every day of the year, nonstop pulse that marketers have to be a part of. They need to be able to respond when they see somebody typing in search results or coming to their website or asking them a question on Twitter. All of that is now marketing. And there's all these micro opportunities, millions of them every day.
When it comes to the consumer decision journey, very simply, the consumer considers what brands they're going to look for, assuming they've identified a felt need. They then decide which brands they're going to evaluate. They make their decision on the purchase. That's the moment of purchase. After that, they follow up with the experience that they're having with the brand. And that then leads to advocacy and or potentially loyalty. And that is where you have a loop. And if not, well, they go all the way back to, I wasn't happy, what am I going to consider next time?
Major media, traditional media, still has a tremendous influence. But as you get into a phase of what we call active evaluation, this is where the consumer has decided they want to buy something, and they're trying to now decide exactly what they do want to buy or which brand they want to buy. They don't wait and let the media come to them. They go out. And it is in that phase that what I call traditional more push advertising has less influence, and the more consumer outreach has much more.
It is the whole journey that we're talking about. The steps up until purchase, afterwards. I mean, we've done work, for example, in skin moisturizers, and 2/3 of the people who buy high-end skin moisturizers interact with a brand online after they buy a product. They fill out surveys, they post reviews, they check out they sign up for their Facebook feed, and this is all after they buy.
We're all marketers now. The premise behind that is really to say what matters is the customer's experience through and through. And social plays a role in this customer experience through and through. So it's very aligned with this notion that everyone needs to be thinking about what the customer's experience is, and everyone can or has a role to play in that experience.
Ask yourself, is the way I go about planning my investments, planning my spend in marketing and sales, really matching the decision journey of my consumers or customers, of how people are really buying.
You've got 4 different social actions that you can take. You can monitor, and that's relevant at every step of the journey. You should know what's going on, what people are saying about your brand. It's always relevant. Then you can respond. And the response part is typically responding to a crisis or addressing an opportunity and extending the experience after the moment of purchase. The third type of action you can have with social media would be amplify. This is where you amplify what your consumers and your customers are saying about you. And it's very powerful because all you're doing as a brand is effectively enabling consumers to speak for themselves. It's much more authentic. That's what Ford did with the launch of the Fiesta. It was largely a social media campaign. They amplified what their excited and very loyal customers had to say about them. And finally, the last type of action you can take with social media is to lead. This is product launches, brand launches, and they can take the form of coupons. So you're leading your consumers to give you a try through a coupon or a massive product launch.
Some of the best examples of companies that have made use of the experience part of the decision journey and really closing that loop are those who have been able to tap into an interest or passion associated with their brands, that they're able to create something bigger that a consumer can be a part of that carries them through. The classic one of this that has gotten enormous press is Nike Plus. The little chip in your shoe that sends information back to your iPod or now maybe your Android phone that tracks what you do when you're running. And not only does it track what you do, it tracks where you went, the whole map of that, the playlist you had, and it creates a whole community sense where you can track how you are versus yourself, versus others. They can create events around it. And there's all this information that is collected up through that experience, managed in various ways, and then sent back out to the community for people to use. Starbucks has done brilliant things as well in the coffee business that have been well documented, including things like crowdsourcing new recipes, getting people to contribute to what will be the next flavors for Christmas, and using that to get people engaged in the brand more.
There's one thing that's never changed. A good brand is worth a lot. People like brands. And in a complex, fragmented world, they like brands almost more than they did before because it brings confidence. And in this digital world, what you want is traffic. Okay? And one thing that big brands have is they have traffic. The legacy companies that can shift their mindset even 50, 60% towards here's where the world's going and build the capabilities and build the processes and occasionally shoot the sacred cow, they're going to do quite well. And we've seen the examples of those companies. And the people that don't, then the natural advantage here is to the attacker. And so the battle is set, which is the mindset advantage of the attacker versus the brand and now the traffic of the incumbent.
What companies are struggling with today isn't the notion that social is important. Everybody knows social is important. What companies are struggling with is to what extent is it important and how do we actually frame what our social initiatives are?
The advice that I give to CMOs when I'm talking to them about this is, I know that you're dealing with more ambiguity than you ever asked to deal with. And that's hard and you've got to work through it, but you've got to take that and you've got to simplify it for dealing with the rest of the organization. And you will only be 80% right, by the way. You can't get it perfect because it's all changing. But there needs to be some simplification if you want people to have confidence in this because, as I say, it does seem like voodoo.
Much more is happening now on the front lines. So customer service people are operating Twitter accounts. People may be just posting in social media. People are managing algorithms in e-commerce, on an e-commerce site that may not be well coordinated with what's happening in a store or in a bank branch. And all of this is being brought to the front line, but there need to be guidelines, brand standards, ways of making sure that all the proper legal characteristics are managed appropriately. And so there's a lot of risk in terms of all this activity moving to the front line that many companies have to think about their policies, their processes, their training. I mean, it changes the way you do planning, how you're budgeting, because now you're not just spending money on campaigns, you're spending money on these other kinds of programs, and so you have to account for that. As you start moving up, though, to 20, 30, 50% of your budget being spent on digital, not just buying media, but creating content, having people lined up against it, that becomes a serious change in the whole way your budget is structured and the way you're managed.
So let's take a real example of what somebody would deal with. So you now spend today 50% on advertising and 25% on social. Now you want to reverse those, okay? Now, when you decide you're going to change that, you are taking on a lot of risk. We've had 40 years of perfecting how to do television advertising. Okay? We know. You go into the best agencies, the best companies, formulaic's the wrong word because it's creative, but they really know. They've been doing it for 40 years. You go over into doing something on social media, you have 2 years. After 2 years, you're pretty good at it, but you're not really good at it. If you suddenly flip 50% of your advertising budget over to something that you're untested or pretty good, you could get the media exactly right and the messaging exactly wrong, and all of a sudden your sales go down. And so the practicality of dealing with this is everybody knows they want to shift over time their money in that direction. But we don't yet have, the learning on how to do it and the experience, and therefore the judgment here is where and how do I start to evolve this?